All right, guys, we're going live here, and it's going to take us a minute to get this started, so stay tuned. Hey, Brandon, where are you going to line up?
So you're in the picture. When you guys stand and talk, you're in the picture here for YouTube.
We have a lot of people tuning in on YouTube, so it's super important.
But we won't take questions on YouTube.
Just make sure you're in the frame somewhere.
In the frame?
You'll be able to see yourself.
So don't be here. Good? Yeah. Please.
Is anyone else in?
No. I'm just going to talk briefly, and then we're out. What's up to you guys? You guys need more? Is that everybody? We're set? We're good?
I think so.
Okay. Hello. All right, guys, let's get started. So I'm Landon Clark with the Sugar House Community Council. This is Judy Short with the Land Use. She did a remarkable job. Again, we are a recognized nonprofit. We're all just volunteers. We're not paid by developers. We get a lot of those emails, so we're just here to listen tonight. So these are the folks that bought the Wells Fargo building. I'm going to invite City Councilwoman Sarah Young up to kind of talk about the process. Yeah, she's a good one. You guys can clap.
Hello. For those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Sarah Young. I am your District 7 Salt Lake City Council member. I appreciate you being here tonight. I've emailed with many of you. Many of you may have also heard from Julie Morey, who's our district constituent, encouraging folks to be here to make sure your voice is heard. So thank you to Landon and to Judy for putting on this event. I do know that it takes a lot of logistics to be able to work with the high school, especially in terms of tonight. So thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about the process, because I think that's important. And I've seen some maybe misunderstandings related to where we are in the process related to this particular project. So when a project is proposed that is different than what it is zoned for, it goes through a process of being first considered by the community council as part of the land use committee. So that is part of the consideration here tonight. So the proposal has not gone anywhere forward related to city council and our process. You here tonight are part of that initial outreach. And the opportunity to give input to ultimately the comments that come from this community council that move forward to the planning commission. Once those comments move forward, the planning commission will consider the application related to the text amendment to be able to change this particular zoning, which is really the conversation that is being had. And then from there, the planning committee makes a recommendation to city council. When it comes before city council, it's actually heard at 3 separate meetings. The first meeting is specific to a working session where the information is presented by staff, the outcomes of the planning commission discussion, and then the developers have an opportunity as well to speak and answer council questions. We then go to a second meeting where we have public comment opportunities. So you have yet another opportunity to be able to come and share your feedback, not just with myself, but also with the other 6 council members. And then finally, in a third meeting, there is a formal vote specific to the outcome. So you might be like, that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but it is a process that takes time. So you will continue to hear about discussions about this project, and that's not a bad thing. It means that we are taking the time necessary to be able to give as many neighbors and residents as possible the opportunity to give input to the process as we move forward. So I appreciate you being here tonight. It's one of my favorite things about being a member of this community is the fact that we have so many neighbors who are interested and invested, just like I am, in the success of our city and what we need to do as a community to be able to reflect those needs, not just through me, but to the greater Salt Lake City Council as well. So I'm here tonight to listen, and I appreciate, again, all of you being here to provide your questions and comments. I will say these individuals have been to Community Council before, as I'm sure many of you know, and I appreciate that in all of the previous settings, that all of our members and neighbors have been polite and kind enough to let these individuals do their presentation and have been thoughtful about giving their comments. You can be passionate about your comment and you can still be professional in the way you present it. We've always done that at Sugar House, and I don't think tonight will be any different. So thank you ahead of time. I appreciate it, and I'll hand it back over to Landon.
Yeah, I want to thank the principal Tyler who's got the slide projector back there, and Derek who's going to do it on YouTube. So thanks for the help, guys. We are going to be done at 7:30, so we're going to start with their presentation. So please don't interrupt. Let them get through it, and then we'll open up for questions. We have Brandon here with another microphone, so we'll line up in this. It's like a stewardess. So then we'll just line up, and then we'll just go to 7:30. They'll have a couple closing comments, and then we'll get on with our night. So, you guys ready? Okay.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Landon. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Brandon. For those of you who didn't come to last month's meeting, my name is Dan Whalen. I'm head of development for our group, Harbor Bay. This is Steve Willoughby, who's our Vice President of Public Government Relations. And tonight, for the first time, we brought our architect partners along, Tom Pope and John Mitchell, to talk a little bit more about design, placemaking, and just scale and massing and how it implicates what we're proposing for this zoning change. We'll try to keep our presentation relatively short because I know that there wants to be a lot of back and forth and again, public comment and again, more listening on our behalf. So we'll try to get through it, not rush, but also just not drag forward so that we can hear from you. So, next slide, please. Again, reorienting, I think at this point, everybody is familiar with the site in discussion, but more than the site, I think what's important is the text change to the zoning that we're talking about is subject to only Sugar House Central Business District Area 1. And that's the area outlined in the black dashed line. And so while Sugar House obviously encompasses much more area to the east, to the west, and the north, and somewhat south as well, this is really the area bound by the highway 13th East, just west of Highland Drive, and predominantly just those few parcels on 21st, where ours is in the red box, and the Sterling Furniture site, and a few elements just on the east corner of Highland Drive. So again, the zoning discussion is relevant to just these boundaries, which is the main commercial district where there really is not any single family residential. And so I think it's just a contextual location for what we're talking about. Next slide, please. You can see here, this is just emblematic of the zoning in this area. And so you can see there's much different zoning as you go to their different areas of Sugar House, and specifically the tallest bike district here is District 1, and that's the area. Next, please. One of the elements that planning asked us to put together in their review during this 45-day period was what would a map look like of the buildable, practically buildable space within this district relevant to the zoning change. Said another way, if we were to increase density and as a result height across District 1, how many parcels would really benefit or be built in theory over time? And so what this map shows is that only about 30% of the land area in this area 1 could be built on practically. The stuff in pink, I know it's a little hard to see because the colors are a little pastelish. The pink is that area. The area with blue cross-hatching is already under development agreements. The area in yellow is already developed. You'll notice some of the residential buildings on the west side of Island Drive. Orange represents parcels that over many years theoretically could be developed, but those are large shopping center parcels with Nordstrom Rack, Target, and a bunch of big box retail stores that it would be very, very difficult to move those parcels and those sorts of things around. So there's not necessarily a quote unquote threat of height and density on those locations. And green is obviously all the park space. And then the two blue dots sort of in the center of the map are the historic Sprague Library. Next slide. Feedback, okay. You can skip this one, this is here, into this slide. On this slide is really the themes of both what we heard at the beginning of December and the things that have come up often in our conversations with community members, with the community council, with the smaller committees, with council folks at the city level. And so those are the things on the screen that really are at the crux of what we hope to address with our project. And really with the zoning at large for, again, that mapped area that was outlined in black. And so what I'd like to get across before I pass the baton to our architects to talk really about design-related functions is, I know there's a lot of distrust in development, and for good reason. And what I hope that this process is, and what our zoning text amendment proposed changes is representative of, is the good that can happen in development, and that we're not just going to try to shove something and force it through, but it's a process about if Salt Lake City is truly growing at the rate of 1% per year, which has been the trend of late, density is coming. Height as a result of density is going to happen. It may not be us, maybe the next guy is a month from now, or a year from now, or 3 years from now, but it's coming. And to that end, we want to show you the right way to do it, and we'd like to do it in a manner that makes everybody who does come behind us have to play by better ground rules and by more strict ground rules and provide legal benefits. And it's not just a binary discussion about tall or not tall, but it's, okay, if you are asking for density bonuses, what do you have to do in return? As opposed to, we're just gonna build the same thing that we already know. Yes, it's houses that's for much needed growth, but beyond that, what does it really do for the community? And that's what the process that we're trying to go through is entailing. And the first step is to have these dialogues and to propose elements of the zoning text that reflect true benefit, not just for us, not just for the parcel that we have, but for the whole community. And anyone that follows in those footsteps and builds in this district specifically in Area 1 would have to do the same or better. And so that's really what the dialogue is about. And that's the process that we want to get through to hopefully make it mutually beneficial to work towards smart, equitable, sustainable, beneficial development for the long term. Next slide, please. Okay. I don't want to talk about you because you hear this.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Pope. I'm a partner with HPM here with my colleague, John Mitchell. And first off, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening and hearing us out. We've not done any work in Sugar House, and so this is a first time for us, and we're really excited about meeting you all. And I can promise you that as architects, one of the things we really love to do is work in communities like this. My background, I'm from the Midwest. I've been practicing for 30 years. The firm that I'm with, that John and I are with, we've been around for almost 40 years. And we specialize in multifamily, residential housing, commercial development, hospitality, and sustainable design, as well as interior design. So we're kind of all over the map. Next slide, please. On that note, we are active and we've worked coast to coast over the last 30 some odd years. And as I mentioned, communities like this is really where we specialize our practice and our development. And the reason being, there's great opportunities in cities and neighborhoods like Sugar House, because as we follow our developer partners around, what we look for in sites are areas that exhibit population growth, development, which, and what follows to that is usually residential development, which also fosters good, vibrant retail and business infrastructure. And so those are things that we look at in sites coast to coast that we're familiar in working with and something that we specialize in. Next slide. One of the things I just want to point out a few kind of example projects here, just to show you the range of what a little bit of what HBA does. On the upper left-hand corner, that's a project called Intro in Cleveland. And that particular site is the nation's largest residential built heavy timber building. We're really proud of it. We finished with Dan and Harbor Bay. And, something interesting about the site, and it's really applicable to our site here in Sugar House, is that, as you can see, it's a relatively big site. We're not covering the entire site with a massive building. What we really like to do is look at how can we creatively manipulate the massing and the height and the program of the building in a way that really is sensitive to the site and helps open up things like parks, plazas, and other active spaces. And you can see in the image on the upper left-hand corner is kind of a big piazza green space that we're really happy about. And the reason we did that in this particular project is because right across from it in this neighborhood is something known as West Side Market. It's a large Byzantine-style historic building with an indoor market, and we wanted to play off of that as a way to really introduce vibrancy to the public right away. The other project in the upper right-hand corner, 1225 Old Town, that's back in Chicago. That's on Wall Street, if you guys are familiar with Chicago. In this project, I wanted to point out something kind of unique about this. This is a strip of Wells that has a lot of 3, 4, and 5-story buildings, which creates this data of low-rise buildings. And so one of the things we were tasked with here is to really integrate a building that played nicely with some of the low-rise buildings, which also incorporated, you can see there's a little bit of a historic building in the foreground, and pick up on the materiality and scale of that in a sensible way. So you can see the brick and the use of glass kind of plays off of some of the contextual areas of the building. But one thing that we want to kind of emphasize with architecture like this that's important is that terracing and setbacks are critical to good urban planning and urban design, especially when you're trying to preserve the public right of way. The project in the bottom right-hand corner, that's Emerald Park. That's a Emerald Park multi-family residential development. And there too, we work closely with the city to help preserve light and air around a public park. And that's the reason why in that particular building, you'll see there's a kind of a gentle terracing of the facade away from the park to really preserve light and air corridors. And then finally on the lower left-hand corner, that's a graduate in Nashville. You guys are familiar with graduate Brand Hotel. They really like to specialize in very eclectic, contextual architecture in different cities, satellite cities, and this one in particular is in Nashville. And this one too, we work with the city closely with because like Sugar House and like our site, the sidewalks are extremely narrow. And we recognize that that's problematic for general safety and just kind of enjoyment of the public right of way. So what we did on this project is we worked with the city to allow us to gradually step back from the public right of way with a series of low-rise and glass elements and atrium spaces, and then gradually the street wall, the kind of brick area. And in this particular building, it's more of an L shape versus like a massive hulk, against the public right of way. And the reason for that, very similar to what we're going to show you here on this side, is that whenever you can create these slender, taller buildings with more of a setback, the better off you're going to be with the public right of way. It's just going to help control the light and vehicle first. Sure.
One reason that I thought these were good examples that Tom and John put together is because they are all in commercial districts of neighborhoods. They are not in downtown areas of these respective cities. And so they're very relevant in terms of the contextual nature. They're in areas that are highly ready for foot traffic, highly transited, still have a lot of vehicular traffic in them, but they're not near the skyscrapers in downtown CBDs. So I think as a point of that, it is taking into account not just the scale of the building and the massing and the way that we deal with the site, but the things that happen around it. And all of these have strong commercial districts with residential arteries and side streets that go off them. We're going to actually take questions as soon as we get through. So I do, because I want to get to everybody, and I just want to make sure that these guys can follow through with their slides.
Thanks, Ed. Next slide, please. Next slide. So just a little bit of a kind of summary of some of the buildings that obviously you live and breathe in the neighborhood you know of. These are a series of existing buildings within a 7 to 10 story range that are kind of up and down some of the main boulevards that lead up to our site. And, you know, they're nicely designed buildings. They're a mixture of brick and glass and other materials that respond nicely to the public right of way. But one thing that all of these buildings have in common, and then I'll point out as we get into our particular project, is that there are definitely constraints to them given the height cap. And that's why we'll see a lot of these buildings have the primary facade is pretty much hard up against the property line with the gradual 15-foot setback as you get over the second floor. And that's pretty much it. That's kind of the constraints that are imposed on a lot of developers that are following the as of right zoning. And what happens, as you'll see in a lot of these buildings, is that the goal in order to make it feasible, economically feasible and viable as a project, is to use as much of the square footage as you can. And so what you end up with are buildings that are pushed out as much as possible to take advantage of the property line versus having the ability to perhaps give a little bit back to the public right of way with larger sidewalks, park spaces, courtyards, etc., as a trade for them. Next slide. As Dan pointed out there, this is just giving you an idea of some of the other areas that are in and around Sugar House that consist of the balance of the zoning of the district. They comprise of malls, fast casual, 1 and 2 story buildings, and kind of common areas. Next slide. So I'm going to pass this over to my colleague John. He's going to touch on some of the site and shadow impacts of the design. And as Dan mentioned, we're all here available to answer all of your calls. I'm sorry, answer all of your questions and or calls. And like I mentioned before, you know, we're really sensitive to your needs. You guys live here. We're from out of town. We want to make sure we hear you and we listen to you, and we try to address your concerns. Because ultimately, we want to bring beautiful architecture that you guys can be proud of, that you guys can walk up and down the street and say, hey, look at this great new building. I was part of this. This was something that is, you know, impactful and that is planning for the future. So with that, John.
Thanks, Tom. As Tom mentioned, my name is John Mitchell. I'm an associate partner at HPA. And so I'm going to talk about the shadows, the massing of the project that we are proposing. And get into a little bit more detail on that. As we understand, that's been one of the major concerns voiced by this group here, and we want to make sure that we're thoughtful in our response to it. And so we can run to the next slide. Part of what we understand with this site, because as we saw on the map earlier, this is in that Sugar House Business District 1 zone, but it happens to be right on that boundary with the rest of Sugar House, where there's a lot of single-family homes, and so there is an increased sensitivity towards shadows, towards setbacks, towards massing, so that there is not that abrupt transition from one to the other. And so we want to be really mindful of that in our design response. And so this diagram here that you see on the screen is an overlay of a site section through 11th Street, looking towards I-80. And so on the right is our proposed building. On the left is the 2-story sterling furniture site. And then we overlay in the red dashed line what the as of right zoning setback requirements are.
Just to give you an idea of if there was no need to come talk to you, this is what could be built, just for a point of reference here. And so what we want to do to improve that, because 11th Street, it's not 13th Street where it's super, super wide and very, cars driving really fast. This is a much narrow street. There are narrow sidewalks, and so it's much more pedestrian focused. And so we want to be mindful and respectful of that. And so I want to point out 3 things in the site section that I think are germane to this discussion. First one being the first floor, where we have a recess of that first floor storefront. That gives a little bit more width to the sidewalk, creates some breathing room for the pedestrian experience. Also provides some potential for spill out of retail, like sidewalk cafe, things like that, so that there's more vitality, activity, interest along that pedestrian realm. Moving up through the building, we are terracing the podium back in a couple of stages, and also lining it with active use, with residential. This isn't like an extrusion of a parking garage where you're seeing it from floors 2 through 7. We're actually seeing residences, and there's terraces, and there's a lot of interactivity visually between that and the streetscape. What that also does is you can see that starts to create a little bit more relief along the streetscape. Again, 11th Street is pretty narrow, and sometimes with these narrow streets, you can have this urban canyon effect when you have too much mass right up along the street. It doesn't really feel that pleasant. And so what we're trying to do is to scale that back and create something that's more inviting. And then finally, when we get to the residences above the podium, we're pushing that as far away from the street as possible. And a lot of that has to do with shadows. We want to make sure that the shadows being cast by this building are as late into the day onto that street, so that there is a minimized impact. I mean, it's not going to be a no impact because the sun goes down at some point, but we want to minimize that impact on the streetscape so that there aren't as many places in perpetual shadow. So speaking of shadows, let's go to the next slide. I can walk through a little bit of that. All right, here we go. So this is a shadow analysis of what we're proposing. The 3 images on the top row, and then on the bottom row would be just a straightforward as-of-right building. So you can see, it's a little hard to see here with the yellow pastel, but I want to point out the center images in each of the rows. That's the noonday sun. And I want to point out that the way that we have oriented our tower is to minimize that impact of shadows being cast to the north, so all of those single-family houses. And then again, the images on the right, where that's in the afternoon, where the shadows are starting to be cast on 11th Street, you'll see that the image on the top right, it is a little bit more than the as-of-right on the bottom right. I mean, it is taller. But what we're trying to do by pushing that mass to as far to the west as possible, that we are minimizing that impact on 11th Street, and keeping that in sunlight, keeping it open and more inviting as long as we can. And so with that, I'm going to kick it back to Tom to talk a little bit about the pedestrian route.
Thank you, John. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the next series of slides, what I'd like to do is just really get into the comparison between what we're calling the as-of-right and our proposed development. So what's on the slide right now, as I mentioned earlier, some of the contextual existing buildings that I pointed out. This is what we could do with current zoning as it is written. We'll have a very minimal setback along the property line. We're going to have a 15-foot setback over the second floor. And then you'll get these kind of massive parties that end up taking advantage of as much of the square footage horizontally as possible because of the height cap. And you could definitely build this. You could fit a good number of units in it, but you are sacrificing a great deal of public benefit in the process. Next slide. So what we're proposing here, as John alluded to, by pushing the massing of the tower, and by the way, north is to the right, And so west is to the top. So by pushing the tower to the west as far as possible, what we're doing is we're creating a lot of light and air and relief along 11th Street. So you can see it sets it up in a nice way. You have a gracious open space. You have these green terracing elements that slowly sweep away from the public right away. You have a great deal of relief along really the majority of the perimeter of the building. Not to mention, we have an opportunity here to create something really special with an outdoor plaza along 21st Street. And as you guys are familiar with the Monument Park right across the street, it has that nice open space and feel to it. It's active on certain days of the week, on weekends. And this is a great opportunity to create a little bit of synergy between our site with that kind of soft radius corner and a lot of open space that's great with the area across the street. We think this is a great public benefit. It's going to bring a lot of light and air and view corridors to this area, and just vibrancy for all of the retail. Next slide, please. So again, as of right, this is looking at the ground floor plan, and as I mentioned, you could do this. You could build this building. You could build it within 10-foot sidewalk, and you could build under the current code. You could build it within 25-foot depth retail. That's the minimum requirement currently in the zoning code. But what happens here, again, because of the height on the cap, you end up having to put a lot of back-of-house parking and non-active spaces on the ground floor because you're sacrificing usable square footage up above. And so it's unfortunate when that happens because you lose that opportunity to create large, open-air active spaces along the pedestrian way. Next slide. So what we're proposing is a vastly greater amount of retail. And the reason we can do that is because now we can add parking on additional floors that we plan to bury and hide in upper levels of the building, as John mentioned, with an alignment with residential. So you're never going to know that there's parking there. Every wall of this building is going to be detailed in a way that looks active. This also allows us, you can see that gracious kind of radius corner on the lower left there that kind of mirrors what's going on in Monument Plaza. We're excited about that because I think there's some really good opportunities there to tie the two together and create this kind of beautiful gateway along 21st. This scheme in particular too also allows us to, again, because of the height, allows us to have nicer units because we're not kind of cramming the same number of units and less space. It allows us to promote this idea of sustainability, which we're very much interested in. Heavy timber as a building product is an amazing thing. It's completely renewable. It's not like any other building material that's out there. It's something that we think is the future, not just here, but in downtown areas all over the country. It's being used in Europe, probably more so than it is in the States here. But it is a great opportunity to bring something that is responsible and sustainable and beautiful. And, all of those things really require an understanding of height and mass and some relief on that in order to make all these things come together. Next slide. So with that retail space that we're creating, all this extra retail space, what we're interested in here is really something that's truly unique. We don't want to do just a series of 25, 30-foot storefronts. We're not interested in that. And neither should you. You should be interested in something that engages you, that has a social component, that has a nice indoor space to it. By having that additional height, we're looking at ground floors that are 15 to 20 foot, that are nice, big, open, spacious areas. The images on the screen here show you a series of market-like retail areas that we plan to bring to our concept. So it really ties in nicely with some of the small boutique businesses that are in Sugar House that we want to bring here. It gives us more flexibility to bring that caliber of retail versus having a lot of constraints because we're kind of forced under the height cap. Next slide. And so you've seen these images before, and as Dan pointed out, this is not about this particular design. This is a concept. This is just showing you the potential, what it could be. we're going to design this building to meet your design guidelines. We're very conscious of that. We're going to make it fit in the context. We're going to use the materiality that's called out for in the zoning code. But we want to make it special. We don't want it to be the same building over and over again. We want it to stand out. We want it to be special. We want you guys to enjoy the spaces. And so this is just trying to inspire you to what it could be and how open it could be and how communicative and connective this space could be. Next slide. And these are just a couple of images around the exterior, just to kind of inspire you, gracious green spaces, planting areas, benches, outdoor cafe seating. All of these things are important to us, and they're all going to be connected with this kind of new, beautiful retail concept right now. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dan. Like I mentioned, we'll answer any of your questions, and thank you guys again for your time.
Yes. Yeah, one point of clarity too, and as you look up and down 21st specifically, there is vacancy, and local businesses have gone away, and they've become corporatized and commercialized, and they recognize that. And so it's not just about jamming a bunch of retail in, because that doesn't necessarily work if there's a bunch of vacancy either. And the vacancy is for a number of reasons, right? Rents are really high, the traffic's too difficult. There's drive-throughs that stick out and cause jams, construction in the roadways, all that sort of stuff. So it's multifaceted, and I don't know that it's all been able to what's the word, adjust as quickly as population growth has come. And so what we want to do with the ground floor is create the opportunity for a market-like setting, for a place for the community to gather, for a place that non-residents of the building still get to engage with the building and kind of act as a hub. And that can come in the form of some food businesses, some soft good businesses, some service-based businesses. It depends, and all of that is on the table and in play with the types of things we want to create there. And that setting and the economic, constraints, if you will, of building within the existing zone kind of restrict us from being able to do that, because you only have so much square footage to utilize to create a source of income and just the construction costs. And so what happens is you get more of the same. And we want to build better. And we want, like I said at the beginning, to require anyone that comes behind us as part of the zoning code and as part of an attached community benefits agreement that is a secondary document that gets attached to the zoning code that is individually negotiated at the beginning of each project with council. That's your kind of guiding rule of law. So it's not just you can come in and, the zoning code says you can build taller now. It's like, no. We still have to get through the brass tacks of each individual detail to which you're going to provide a community benefit in order to build density. So I think that's an important thing, just as a point of reference to understand the process we're going through and what we're really asking for in that context to area 1 of the central business district. So that's our presentation. It is 6:45, so that leaves about 35-40 minutes for questions, and I'm going to let Landon and Brandon moderate.
Do our best.
All right, if you guys want to line up over here, Matt, you want to go first?
Over here.
And then Brandon will lead this charge.
And
so again, we have about,
there's a lot of people here. We only have about 45 minutes, so let's keep questions concise and constrained as much as possible.
Hey, Brandon, hold on a minute. Judy Short wants to say a few words.
What I wanted to tell you was, if you're gonna give us a 2-minute speech here, that's great, but I can't write that fast. So I want you to go back home and put it on the comment field on our website, so that it comes right to me in an email, so I get the whole thing. And that applies to you guys listening at YouTube. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Brandon, go ahead.
Hi, this is really for Sarah, but because I don't know who to talk to about this.
Like you're a rock star. There you go.
Here we go. So Sarah, take notes. Number one, the news said that just yesterday that the population of Salt Lake is in decline. We're going down, because no one can afford to live in Salt Lake City. They're closing elementary schools because young families with kids cannot afford to live in Salt Lake City. There are vacancies at every complex from 7th East all the way up to 23rd East, long-term and south. All you see is vacancies. retail stores don't make it under these apartments. Very seldom a bike shop that's needed. Haven't seen anybody else make it. My question though, is one more comment. You're 2 blocks from an earthquake fault. The Wasatch Fault runs along 13th East. The Wasatch Fault runs along 13th East. The last time I checked, you're 2 blocks from there. The other thing is, I thought you were going to put up 32 floors. I'm very confused. That doesn't look like 32 floors. So did something happen and I didn't get that memo, or?
I can respond to that. No, I can respond to that. Well, the first piece of news that came out was unfortunately released with inaccurate information. We have a zoning proposal with text, and I'd like to address too, that the text is going to be amended even lower than what it was written at 305. It's going to be at 240. So it's a substantial, 65-ish foot difference, which would limit us to this 21-ish story range that we've been discussing now for 60-ish days. Sorry. Yeah. So no, to address that, not that you missed anything, it's that the original piece of news came out before we actually were ready to talk about what we wanted to propose.
Yeah, I'm gonna be like really awkward on this microphone. Apparently, I have to be really close. So I'm curious, what was the date that you ran those shadow simulations to pick? Because those look like summer shadows.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The
Oh, sorry, okay.
Oh, sorry. Also, my name is Matt.
So that's taken at the summer solstice, so
Yeah.
like, 9 June.
So that's like the least shadows. That's the best
Yeah.
shadows. You pick
Right.
the best
It's,
days. So if
well,
you run
we-
these simulations at the worst date, the winter solstice, which is when I ran, they look a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
They're shockingly way undulated on a different plane of course. Like I don't even know why you actually showed those because there's no shadows in the summer. That's the point.
yeah, well, we showed yeah, you're absolutely right. So we showed the summer because that's usually when most people are around and active and,
Well, no. So the winter is when I want the sun. Like in the summer, I have the sun. In the winter, I need the sun. That whole street, 11, is cast in shadow. I actually noticed you at Sugar House Coffee highlighted in red, which makes me think that maybe you've been talking to them because they've been concerned, rightfully so. And I'm worried that you showed them that and we're like, see, look, no shadows. No, in the winter, Sugar House Coffee will be dark. They lose almost 60% of their sun in the winter. And that was at 150. This is P40 now? This is nuts. I mean, that shadow, you need to get that out of the presentation. That's dishonest. Also, one thing just for everyone, I got 2 minutes, use them. Trigonometry, as you go higher, the shadow is exponentially longer. So it's way a bigger effect when you're moving closer to the front of the math. That's just the math. So that was very misleading. I did not appreciate the shadows. I don't really need a response, even if you want to. You're welcome.
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. We're showing one time of the year. There's deeper shadows in the winter as they are in the spring, and the shadows move faster, when the sun is lower. And so what we studied too, though, is even during the spring and winter months, the shadows on the low-rise buildings all kind of work the same. So the shadows of a 8-story building or a 10-story building in our plinth, the way we have it designed, are the same as other 7 and 10-story buildings in the district. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so maybe I can help with that. That was part of the analysis. You're absolutely right. 20 stories, definitely taller than 10. We do not argue with you there. Yeah, and so that, exactly, and so to help manage that is part of the reason why we are pushing that mass further away from the street because of that. Because as you go taller, you are going to be having more of an impact. So we're going to try and keep that on our site and on that podium and not as much onto the street.
Okay, but there's nothing you can do at that height to limit it. Right now, especially in that design specifically, the entire north side was all built up. That shadow reaches Hollywood Ave. Along the whole north side. So like that shadow comes from the northernmost part of the property. So you adding mass only on the north side does not mitigate that in any way. You might have mitigated it for Sugar House Coffee, because that whole west side, you moved it, 40 feet west? That's nothing at this scale. It's going hundreds and hundreds of feet east.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Tim Kruger. I realize you're. I realize you're not from Salt Lake, but over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had 2 major high-rise fires in Salt Lake and Mill Creek areas. And those were both impeded because fire engines couldn't get close enough to actually extend ladders. To extend a ladder, average fire truck around here has 118 feet of ladder, but they can't go 118 feet straight up. They have to go on an incline. Well, where you have a narrow street, like on the east of your project there, that fire truck can't get far enough away to really extend a ladder, on about the sixth floor or thereabouts. Same thing would go on the 21st South side because you've got other things that impede. So if you're going 21 floors, what happens in the event of a fire? People to die. What's your plan to get people out and protect the community, surrounding community? Because during a fire over here in Sugar House, it affected all the little businesses. They literally had to shut down for months. Most of them had none.
Absolutely, no. It's a good point. It's interesting, right? The buildings you're talking about are in that 7-8 story range, built out of stick frame construction, much like a single family home. And yeah, those are essentially commercial kindling, if you will. And a lot of buildings that I've seen of late, they even have to be torn down because they're getting into a later phase of construction and not using fire treated wood. And that's also causing challenges, right? What mass timber does, and specifically with what a design that we will actually work through, we don't have a design yet, right? That's another piece of this discussion is these are concepts in nature to drive what we think is the best approach to urban design and massing for the zoning we're proposing for Central Business District Area 1. Right? So while we are using our site as the modus operandi, if you will, to exemplify that, we actually haven't designed it to a level that is like ready to go for a building permit, of course. But what you're saying, mass timber is a perfect answer. It's an answer to that. It's an answer to seismic challenges from building out of other materials that are less resilient and even anti-fragile, if you will, if you're familiar with the term, to those sorts of events. And that's why we think not only are they sustainable, but they answer the call in those moments. And other things that we do in high-rise construction are have additional means of egress. So 3, sometimes even 4 means of egress. We have special fire elevators that work for the fire service, even in the event of a fire. We have redundant water sources. That means if one of them happens to go out during a fire, another one comes in as in its place to serve those sorts of issues. And so in these sorts of buildings, once you get up above that 8, 9, 10 story range, there's a whole new set of rules. And we play by those rules, and not only that, but they're designed for the life safety instances that you're talking about. And so no, people don't die. They evacuate as quickly as possible, and having the means of egress and the sprinkler systems and the secondary levels and backups and the belt suspenders, if you will, those types of things are dealt with in the design phase. Thank you.
I'm Debbie Sorensen. Let me be clear that my comments are not directed to you personally, but professionally. I do not sugarcoat things as I want honesty to be front and center. I am one of the many homeowners living in the neighborhood of the Wells Fargo building and affected by this zoning building situation. I attended the last meeting and remember you using the word collaboration more than once. If you meant that, it is beyond my imagination to consider how collaboration would mean you asking for a rezoning to triple the height of your building from current code of 10 stories to 30. That seems to me to be professional arrogance. You come from several states away and seem to only care about making more than boatloads of money with no thought to the damage your 2 tall buildings would do to this very old special neighborhood. My suggestion and request is for you to take a step back from the money tables and recognize that it's not fair-minded or collaborative for you to sacrifice our quality of life for your over-ambitious financial goals.
My name is Cheryl Sandberg. I'd like to compliment you as an architectural firm on the plan. I thought it was very well thought out.
I thought, when you talked about the plaza area and how you try to mitigate the impact, and you try to kind of mirror the monumental aspect of Sugar House. Sugar House has been monumental. Sugar House has the plazas that you would anticipate producing. Sugar House already had all those intimate walkways, the parks, the special, all the kinds of projects that you can have in your small piece of property to go up, to impact and have design around. It doesn't have the span of space to respond to that, but we already have it. We had it before. We have places to meet. We have charming places to walk. What I'm concerned about is not your fine plan, but what I'm concerned about is the people that allow you, the zoning, when they say rule of law, the rule can be changed. When I talked to someone several years ago, because we have impact, the city, Salt Lake City does not recognize the historic registry that Highland Park is on. It doesn't meet the, I mean, we worked with this for a long time in terms of how things are built, and if they're within the planning section, they've been very careful to arrange around and to have a kind of we act like we're a free forum here to speak with things, but I think it's a FECM plan, things already determined, and you're caught kind of in the middle of this. But I believe that when this is allowed, then other things would be too, because our zoning and the rule of law that we talked about, or any rules in terms of things to protect the city are long gone. And I'm very disappointed about that. And my confidence level in that process of Salt Lake City is in such decline that I'm only here to just hope. And it's not the impact of what you've done here, but it's I hope that we're all here for that very reason. My confidence is low, and I'm really practicing a beautiful city before it has been impacted in the last 10 years.
Hi, my name is Muhib. I was born in India. I moved to Salt Lake Valley when I was 7. I lived all over Taylorville, Philippines, Sandy. Went to Skyline High School, went to the University of Utah. Now we're in Sugar House and Duplex. I love this valley, I love this area. And I want to talk a little bit about why that area is so valuable. I love being able to walk to places that I want to go to. I can't count the amount of times I've walked to the Spring Library, and walked to Sugar House Coffee, which is the end, get a coffee dinner, and be able to walk or drive or bike home. I love that area so much. It's where I get my haircuts, where I hang out with my friends, I have some good memories there. And I want as many people as possible to have access to that area. Sugar House is wonderful. We're all here because we think Sugar House is wonderful. And I think more housing is the way to do it. And we can't continue to have more people come into this valley without building denser, higher housing. There's only so much land that we have, and we need to go higher, not just out. This valley is not endless. Cities are not a museum. They're not there for us to enjoy as artwork. They're places where people work and live and play. If we treat them like museums, then it should be encased in ice and not change for decades. That's how they got about San Francisco. Their housing prices are closer to home rather than the city. I encourage this community to support this development. I even encourage you to go higher and make this the highest mass timber building in the United States.
Dan, thank you for not wearing the pink shirt. Listen, I have really just questions before I put my pen to paper, which I would encourage everybody to do, because those are the comments that will be seen. Okay, this is COVID, whatever you call that. So, you have neglected again and again and again. You keep talking about this concept, we really haven't put pen to paper. You know that's BS. Because you had to have worked the numbers. So I have asked, I don't know how many meetings, how come? We talked about 6 months ago, you said, well, I said it's about 200, don't you? You want to go twice. You said that's more in the ballpark. Now all of a sudden it's 305. Then all of a sudden, when that newspaper article came out, it was, you chopped off, I think, between the meeting and when your presentation, 10 stories. So I want to know how high is the proposal specifically for Wells Fargo, because the rezoning is up to 305. And I want to know on every one of the things that you present as architects and all these other places, and I will chat with my friends in Tennessee, in Cleveland, in Ohio. I want to know their impression of those buildings. I want to know how high are each of those buildings. You keep avoiding the issue of height. Could we please have the heights and the number of stories?
Absolutely, yeah, and we didn't avoid it. We said 21 when we came in December. The zoning adjustment will be brought down to that height, so the 305 will no longer be in the text. That was, I guess, call it a miss. It'll be brought down to reflect the 21 stories that we have been talking about and that we've been discussing, and what our intention is with the setback building that we've at least been working through in concept. So that is the number of stories. There's no the zoning code will reflect a maximum of 240 feet. That's correct. 21, sorry, 21.
All right, good evening. Thank you for coming. I appreciate the fact you guys are here in front of all of us residents of Sugar House, myself included, 35 plus years here. We've seen a hell of a lot of changes. And, Sugar House used to be this eclectic little neighborhood, walkable, drivable. It isn't that way anymore. But my big question to you is, what have you considered is mitigation or minimizing future traffic impacts with your 3 stages, which will include demolition, excavation, and then construction? Because you're in a very, very confined area. And it's been hell driving through Sugar House during the minor construction that's occurred, let alone what you guys got proposed. My second question is, what have you looked at with aquifers and proximity to Harley Street as far as when you excavate, as far as you have to go for 240, 250 foot tall building, you're going to get down into some areas that nobody has explored before in the Sugar House area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are good questions. The first question is, one of the reasons we've been, and I'll call it also luck, that we've been trying to get through this process at the early stages of 24 and the latter stages of 23, was to get into a level of confidence that a project could move forward in a timeline that was in tandem with a lot of the existing roadway construction that's just commencing on Highland Drive 11th, and obviously 21st that is to follow. And so to minimize the disruption by going at the stuff below ground that you're describing at the same time as those, and not after that's all done, then coming in. And so that's part of the dance is getting through the public process in a timeline that hopefully allows us to still work in that time frame that is minimizing disruption. The second question, we have studied the geotechnical aspects of the dirt and what's going on. We're very familiar with how Parley's runs under 21st and actually on the south side of 21st where the view is. They described that they found a river underneath when they excavated for that basement. And yeah, there's tributaries and there's water, groundwater at certain heights. And all of that is dealt with structural engineering and the way that our design team navigates the foundational basement systems and those sorts of things. And so once we really determine what's there after the Wells Fargo building goes away, because some of that stuff you can't actually surgically understand until the existing building is demolished, then we can finalize those sorts of decisions and deal with potential water, obviously seismic issues, and those sorts of things. So all stuff that happens.
Follow-up, I guess. So is it fair to say there's no traffic, there's no aquifer studies or evaluations at this point?
At this point, we have not conducted a formal traffic study post-construction, but the construction traffic studies really couldn't happen until we had a finalized plan of the logistics of how we mobilize and how we get things to and from. So no, that would happen later in the stage after we have some semblance of an approved path forward. So, but yes.
Hey, I'm Bo Hennings. I own a home, walk away. I couldn't disagree more
with that can statement. I think my concerns are primarily around traffic in the area. They're already, sorry, a shit show. And I mean, 11 just narrowed to 2 lanes. I don't know. I haven't been to any of these meetings so far, so I don't know you personally. Or you live in Salt Lake, or
No, I don't. We spend obviously a fair bit of time here, but no, that wasn't.
the going northbound on 11 in times of peak times is already really bad. The right turn lane was eliminated, like that backs up like crazy. So if you add, how many units are going to be in this? 400?
Yeah, that's what.
You add 400 more residents plus people working there and are parking in there and coming in and out all day, every day. That's like, I can't even imagine, to be honest with you. And then you add an element of like, you added retail. And by the way, the design looks beautiful, looks great. I'm not criticizing that, right? If it all goes well, you'll be attracting people to there. So where are they going to park? How are they going to get in? And then there's the whole element of like, yeah, we live in a modern society where there's food delivery a block north of there. People are double parking to deliver food all day long. It's crazy. So if you add that many people and ignore the traffic, which is easy to do if you're a developer, that is the burden lies on the community to live with that forever. And I also want to comment around, you made a comment earlier when you were saying, in order to make this economically viable or feasible, you have to build up. That is understandable, but the burden is not on the community to make it economically viable. Like, you could go to the west side, you could develop all
Those are actually outstanding points, and the first is that with the 10-story as of right project, right, with the current zoning allows, we'd still be north of 300 units, right? So that density wouldn't be changing drastically. What the second piece is referring to economically viable. That's the community benefits, making those economically viable for us to put into the project as programs, as design features, as elements that get interacted with, right? So that's what I'm referring to when I say economically viable, because what you see, and I'm not bashing projects, right? They need to be built and people need housing. But what you see that people have continuously said, we don't want more of that, is what you get when the economic constraints don't allow you to flex and do things that create benefits for the public. So that's really kind of the nuance of the comment that I was describing. But the traffic that you're talking about, it's all relevant. And one of the things that we want to do and what our design approach is I know everybody doesn't walk everywhere. I know that, people can't always walk, and that weather, and there's snow, and there's all these things that happen that you need a car, at least some of the time, maybe most of the time. And so one of the things is, I think what you've seen is even without density, right? Even with what I'll call suburban type drive-through developments and strip centers and power centers with big box retail, even with that, and actually because of that, that's what's causing traffic challenges, not truly residential development. Because when you talk about a building where people live, they're really not making that many trips a day, especially if they're at a great location with walkable access, with 2-3 grocery stores within 3 blocks, with bookstore across the street, with coffee shops across the street, with breweries that they can, walk to and do their daily errands in. So there's not as many trips from a residential perspective as you would expect to and from the building. And the parking for not just on-site retail, but additional retail was one of those quote-unquote benefits that we've been asked to think about, because businesses in the street, especially local businesses, have said parking is a challenge. So that's it.
For sure it is. And the thing is, you're adding net new 300 cars doing trips in and out of there to bank right now, right? Like, this is net new, or 400.
Could I jump in real quick? The one point I'd like to make, you made a great comment. This site gets perceived to be almost as though it was a greenfield or a vacant site. I mean, we're here today because the site's a former Wells Fargo property. They vacated the area. Previously, they have 150 employees there. They have administrative mortgage operations. They had a bank. They had an ATM with the drive-through component to it. So when we talk about traffic, we completely agree with your perspective and your point. But when we talk about going from where it's at now to 228, if we went to buy right or 330-ish from a unit perspective, I don't think that's a fair comparison, because what that site was much more active. It's been there since 1982. So when we talk about that, when we talk about it from a traffic standpoint, that's the bar that we're looking at, and that's the direction that we're going. So we appreciate the perspective, and we want to get an understanding of that as well. So those are all great points. Those are things we want to understand. I think as we go through this progression, it's really understanding what that looks like from what it was as Wells Fargo, what it includes from a traffic standpoint, what it would be from a buy right, and then what are we really adding to it. So it's a great question. Thanks, David. Thank you.
Eric Wynn, my question is definitely on traffic, and we covered that, and it's really good. I guess the other question I had too was, are you making any mitigation plans? Are you working on plans to talk about traffic, how that's going to be handled? That intersection is incredibly busy. It's not pleasant to walk against. You lined out the fact that you could have like a nice parallel between that side of the street and then where the plaza is now. That's going to be impassable with all this extra traffic, and it might as well be a wall in between on or south traffic. So I have a question about that. And then my second question was just like, we also have a problem of a lack of affordable housing here. Just wondering what the plans are for that. Are you just doing a total amount of affordable housing, or what does that look like as well? Zero. No, not zero. Well, it is possible with a negotiation with council and the community benefits agreement that would go along, right? So essentially from an affordability standpoint, well, how many units, what type of affordability? Does it mean also affordability for families? In our aspects, yes, we're open to all of that. And that's what I mean. I don't remember what the gentleman wanted. Just real quick. When I say economically viable, right? That's what I'm referring to, elements like that we can't accommodate any of that in a 10-story massive building that we're talking about. So in that aspect, yes. And then traffic, that's something we're going to have to study, especially as we get further into design and that sort of thing. And I'm sure that will be one of council's requests as we go further along as a formal traffic study and analysis. Thank you.
Okay, we got 20 minutes left and we got about 10 people, so I need everybody to be as concise as possible. Thank you for being here. I know you guys are our position.
Yeah. You guys do.
I was just really responding to questions. But yes.
Yeah.
My name is Kelly Hanna. I have a real estate office in Sugar House. I've been selling real estate in Salt Lake City for 25 years. My office space is closer to the north boundary of your property than your proposed height. So I have a very personal and professional stake in this. A couple questions. The first one is, on page 3 of your petition to the Planning Commission, you guys stated that the sustainability district was already adopted. Can you talk to me about that? Because that's not my understanding.
We actually have our zoning official here, attorney Jason. Do you mind speaking on that, or if maybe one second?
Are we fielding questions? My name is Jason Bull. I'm a Players Home. Again, I don't have the exact reference, but the zone has not been adopted. What's being proposed? As we looked at different plans that have been adopted with Salt Lake City, we've tried to incorporate, whether it's the housing Salt Lake City or the Climate 2040 plan that Salt Lake City has adopted. Salt Lake City leadership has identified sustainability as a priority, and those were some of the guiding documents that we used in drafting the proposed code.
That's great, thank you. And I am a big fan of, well, I'm not anti-development, I'm not anti-growth. I think there is a process to change the zoning. My concern about this is a couple-fold. One, your attorneys claim specifically in the document that zoning was adopted, which is strictly false at this point. And I think what you're effectively asking for is a spot zoning approval, an exemption to the zoning. And if we start making zoning approvals based on individual single parcel private property developments, we are in for a world of hurt as we go, and that's not sustainable.
My name is Laurie Gray, and I'm a part of the business in Sugar House since 2006. And I agree with almost all the opposition, so I'm not going to review anything, but I want to talk about the perspective of a business owner. We are not living in a field of dreams in Sugar House. Just because you build it does not mean they will come. Initially, they might come, but then they all go away. So my studio's on Monument Plaza, and since 2014, when all the development around Monument Plaza was done, I counted, I have photographs of all of them, 20 restaurants have closed, either on the plaza, on McClellan, or that little shopping center on the west side of McClellan. That doesn't count all the empty spaces that are on Wilmington, on 21st South, and currently still on McClellan. So Emily, who owns Sugar House Coffee, did this nice little survey. She surveyed 596 people that come into her place. Very interesting. More than, I would say about 2/3 people drive to her place. They don't walk. And the biggest demographic is 18 to 34 years old. Also, the smallest demographic is people that own or that rent apartments in Sugar House. I'm sure that she would be happy to put this online somewhere for you all to look at. But what it says to me is that the people that live in the apartments already that have been built, lots of apartments have been built in the past 10 years, are not supporting the local businesses. They're not walking there. We cannot survive in business unless people come from outside the community. And what I hear all the time from my customers and other people is, oh, we don't come to Sugar House anymore because we can't park. There's road construction all the time, and there's way too much traffic. The places that have thrived are the bars. And I'm in full support of the bars. I mean, I'm Hopkins is one of my favorite places to go. But do we want to be just a community of apartments and bars? I don't think so. We don't want to lose our neighborhood feel. And so you talk about what you're going to do for the community. I don't think your retail space is going to work. I really don't. I think with all the traffic, the construction, people just will not come. Unless they come downstairs from your apartments. We need the rest of Salt Lake City to help support us. I do love the design of the building. I mean, I think your architectural design is beautiful. It just needs to be shorter.
If we could, Emily, if we could get a copy of that survey, we'd love to look at that further. So we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Scott Carr. I was at the last meeting. I spoke at the last meeting, so if you want to hear my points, just go back and review that meeting, so I don't repeat myself. To be honest, I would say the same thing today that I said last week. Your presentation was nice. It's more stuff, all the studies that you showed and all that stuff. While I was watching it, I took notes, and I can kind of make a discussion against each point that you made. I'm not going to do it here. So I'm putting together a written presentation. I've been in exactly your spot where I have to make presentations to sell a concept. And I go back and forth between Park City, which I mentioned. I was around for the Treasure Mountain deal. I would suggest you guys go look at that scenario, because the guys that were presenting Treasure Mountain did exactly what we did. They came out with cut-and-paste projects that did match the community specifically. Everybody in the community saw that from the get-go. It was a long concept to build tall buildings above Old Street was just inconceivable. That was years of back and forth. The Swee family who was trying to do it, who I personally know, spent millions of dollars changing their designs over and over again. Every time they had a meeting, they got pushback. So when you showed that one line drawing that shows you're kind of close to your concept, which I think everybody's reacting to, but that only shows the first 5 floors. So it's very misleading. So I'm speaking to you guys for advice. I said last time, Sugar House is really suffering and starting to wake up from years of abuse from developers that have come in and thrown in these mass developments. And the city, for some reason, feels that Sugar House can be the dumping spot for a bunch of dense, as you guys said, inevitable high-rise buildings, which is absolutely not true. Go to Santa Barbara and try to build your building and see how far you get. Sugar House, including everybody here, stand firm, stand for what you want your community to be, and insist on nothing less from your elected officials. Hold them accountable.
We're gonna finish this line so we can finish with Mike Ronan, so.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ben Raskin, and I've lived in Sugar House now for 16 years, but knowing a lot of the residents and my neighbors in the communities that I've been here for a blip. But the one thing that I've experienced that entire 16 years has been non-stop construction. It's been baked into the cake that we're going to be a city and a community that's going to be growing. But unfortunately, part of the charm of living here does get diminished dramatically. My greatest concern with this amendment, if you're trying to get through, is not your design specifically, but I'm concerned about Sterling Furniture. They eventually decide they're going to start building on that. If Barnes and Noble decide they want to start trying to grow Barnes and Nobles into another matching building that's going to be 240 feet. I mean, at some point, we are looking at turning Sugar House into a new downtown. And at some point, I would like to be able to enjoy this community, without the non-stop construction. I agree with everybody about the traffic issues. I agree with everybody about the small business issues. But I don't see getting an amendment to double the size of your buildings being the solution.
Oh, okay. My name is Lee Reck, and I live on 1483 East Hollywood Ave, just above where you're doing that. I've been in the neighborhood 30 years. I did an addition on my home 24 years ago, and my neighbors freaked out, and I only went up 30 feet. But I can tell you that, like, the height of the building is too much, like, for our neighborhood. I think the design is actually quite nice, too. I'm not against it, but my main question to you, and because my son lived in the Park Avenue apartments for about a year, is not just affordable housing.
Lily Whitehead, please come to room C100. Lily Whitehead, please come to room C100.
I'm definitely not Lily Whitehead. But my question to you is ownership versus renting. So all of these buildings, Park Avenue, Sugarmont, they're all charging astronomical rental fees. Nobody can afford it. The young kids, the millennials, whatever, the 20, 30, 40, it's hard. And there's no equity in the community that way. So whether you do 200 units, 300 units, 400 units, is there going to be the ability to offer equity in Sugar House versus transient rentals that come and go and sublet? Because that doesn't help our community either. So I would say overall I'm against the height, not against a beautiful building and residential living, but the height and the amount of units probably, yes. But I would love to know about renting versus ownership. If that's something you're considering.
Thank you. It's just to be brief here on the kids who maybe come back a little bit. I graduated from BYU just down the road a few years back, and since then I've seen countless friends who grew up here in Utah and have had to move out of Salt Lake City or out of Utah entirely just because of the cost of living. And I just want to really encourage everyone here to recognize that being compassionate towards entities, being compassionate towards people. And there's a smart way to build. You can have plenty of mouthpiece with this power, but there's a smart way for us to invite our friends and our sons and daughters to grow up and stay in a safe community that they all grow in wilderness. Now, I've just had to see too many people leave because of the rise of cost of living. And actually, over the last year, 2022, 2023, the rent prices actually went down. And a big part of that was because we built a lot. And I encourage us to build more. And there is a direct effect of supply and demand that we can see take effect when we do build more. So I just encourage everyone here to be conscious. Thank you.
Thank you. This guy's been unbelievable. We've got a little kid with him tonight. He's been here for almost 2 hours. All right, two more guys.
Thank you, Sugar House Council, obviously, for putting this together because.
You wanted me to answer the previous question about?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. Her question is yes, is it rental or?
It is rental, and my answer to kind of, as well as that gentleman's question is, if you build the right way, right? I'm not suggesting there's only one way to do that, but if you build the right way and you have versatility in the number of units and the types of units, and you encourage larger units for growing young families, right? That's not, the whole notion of renters then, need more space and they need affordability and then they go to the suburbs. It's not unique to Salt Lake, or that's every community. It's like what happens when we've got schools closing here, right? And so everything kind of affects that sort of movement of folks as they get older and as they have families and they make plans. And so if you build the right way to encourage that and have it be a natural stepping stone, and if these folks love Sugar House, are renting, the obvious next step would be to look for a home in the vicinity, right? And so I think that's another thing, that with this zoning and this district, not displacing any existing housing, not tearing down or not moving any existing for sale product, that's also a big piece, and not proposing that this zoning expands to other districts of Sugar House where there is already for sale housing, to take stuff away that is vastly needed is to create more and create other opportunities for that stuff to thrive. And there's just dynamics of rental and for sale stuff that changes real estate cycles and as interest rates change. So all that stuff is kind of the answer to the question in a convoluted way, but this is a rental project, and if it's done smartly and intelligently, and with the approach of what you're describing, it's creating a place where people can live for a period of time and then, grow in place. That's what we're trying to do.
So thank you, Sugar House Council, for putting this on. I was busting at the seams and really appreciate the Hive and the Sugar House Council for really doing a good job of getting this all here. I urge you to consider the past as a few projects that have happened in the past so far. 21st and 21st obviously is one that I would say not getting granular. If you look at it from what they propose, it's not at all what it is in the end. It's not the way it looks. It's awful, but it's cheap. So you got a lot of fluff and then you got action. So let's just remember that. Also, years ago, we got these height that we have now because a lot of money came in and did a fancy dance, and here's where we're at now. But what didn't happen there, and I've been here for 30 years, is that there wasn't enough community knowledge about it. So again, Sugar House Council, all of us here today, I wholeheartedly urge you to reach out to everyone in your community and touch them with this idea, not whether you believe it or not, or it should be, but I think this community all needs to know, and we're all here, and I would encourage you and challenge you to reach out to everybody and give them the right knowledge. Knowledge is power, and I think in the end, we'll all be kind of on the same page, right? So I would ask you to do that. The question I have is, when we got to this height, what is the height now? What is the code at this time? 110. I've heard a bunch of numbers, so is it a? Oh, perfect. It's 105. And you bought this property, right? You own it.
That's correct.
Okay. And before you bought it, you knew what the code was.
Yes.
Isn't that really telling? Just stay with the word. Just stay with what it is. Don't assume that you can press this into another, bait switch.
Hi, my name is Tia Brennan. I appreciate you coming here and laying out the plans, some of which are really admirable in their concepts, etc. However, you present your whole thing as if it's A or B, one or the other. And I encourage you to look at your profit margin and mitigate what you have planned there. 21 stories is too much. We will not put up with that. We will not. So you can just figure that out. So if they're really interested in our community and making a good adjustment here, then cut back on the profit margin. I know you can do that. Thank you.
No, thank you, everybody. We do appreciate it. I know it's an emotional process on everything and everyone who's been here a long time. So we are respectful to that. Hopefully you sense that in our tone and our approach, at least. And whether or not you agree with what we're asking, I do appreciate all the feedback, all the communication, and we'll continue to work. And so thank you for the time. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for talking and being passionate. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, hey, thank you for being so respectful tonight. We're proud of this direct community.
Just want to remind you to make sure that you put that on the comment form on the website, so that we all get it.
And tell your friends if they haven't heard about this. Thank you.